Hello, it's time for my Nexus 6P review, and since it's quite outdated with this device being already out on the market for half a year, I will keep it a little more casual and focus towards more of my main viewers who still want to know my opinion on it. So I will skip a few maybe not so important things, but therefore go into a few things that most people won't care. But what I will also do is compare it with the Huawei Mate 8, because a lot of people already asked me which one to get between those two, so this one will be coming, but as for right now, it's only about the Nexus 6P, and the first thing that I wanted to cover is the design and build quality. The first thing that I actually noticed is how big this device feels. Even though it's 5.7 inches, it feels even a little bit bigger, because if we check the bezels here, they aren't really super small. The Huawei Mate 8 does a better job here, as you can see. So also in terms of height, it is actually taller than the 6-inch Huawei Mate 8. In terms of width, it is better, yes. And in terms of thickness, it definitely feels noticeably thinner. So it feels thinner than expected, but for some reason a little bit more unwieldy. Not quite so sure. But what they did quite nice is we have a nice curve here. So it feels quite nice in the hands. We have chamfered edges. For now, they seem to hold up quite well over time, because this review unit has been abused quite badly, because I have quite a few scratches on the display already. And since we are talking about the display, there is a little bit of a slight raised edge along the front, but you won't really feel it because it's a quite smooth transition, and this is something that I definitely like. So I don't think this edge will add any protection, but it's there and it's okay. In terms of fingerprint reader, let's compare with the Huawei Mate 8, and here we'll see a noticeable difference, because the Huawei Mate 8 turns on so much faster, and I'm not quite sure why. Because both are Huawei devices, and I am very confident that Huawei has the fastest fingerprint and the most accurate ones, because I have almost no misfires, where I have a few ones here. It still works nice, still works fine, but for all the Nexus users who say this is the best fingerprint reader, I'm pretty sure they haven't used an original Huawei so far. Other than that, what do we have? We have the microphone, we have the camera and the flash. On the top we have the headphone jack. On the left side the SIM card tray without an SD card, the USB Type-C, of course the antenna lines, and the buttons. Not super happy with them, because I'm not quite sure how many times I've pressed volume up to turn on the device. The buttons also don't really have too much resistance, but this is very something common of Huawei, because they have this tendency to make this slightly more loose buttons. But I prefer the button placement of the Huawei Mate 8. As you can see, it is just noticeably lower, and I didn't really press it wrongfully so much. But in terms of overall build quality, it is absolutely well done, because it doesn't squeak at all. It feels super solid, well done, quite round and organic in the hand. Just a little bit on the bigger bulky side, but for 5.7 inches that was to be expected. So overall, not really any complaints besides maybe the buttons, but that's just the buttons. Also, one thing to mention, there is a notification LED, but it's quite tiny and quite faint, because the Nexus 5X does a little bit of a brighter and bigger job on the bottom, but at least it's there. Now let's check the display. Quad HD, Super AMOLED, and one thing that I wanted to show off, the color accuracy, where I am quite disappointed, because if we compare it here with the Huawei Mate 8, which I think has a spot on color calibration, you can see how much of this is. Because as you can see, this is the same picture, and it looks like I have a sunburn on the Nexus, where the Huawei looks extremely great. It looks a little bit overexposed, but this is due to the camera. So this is just a noticeable thing here of the display. The white is definitely more on the yellow side, quite a little bit noticeable, too warm. Blacks are great. Contrast is almost a little bit too much, because you've seen this with everything being a little bit too yellow and oversaturated. And this even compared to something like the Samsung Galaxy S7, which is way more accurate. So I should complain for this display, but I see the qualities. It is bright enough, the viewing angles are stable enough, and if you use, since it is a Nexus device, a custom kernel, just calibrate the colors to your liking, and you should be fully satisfied. Because as I am right now, I am halfway decently satisfied, but I know I could easily fix that and get a really, really great experience from that. So I'm fine with that. Now let's check the sound here, and this one is impressive. I can stop this right away, because this sound is just amazing. We have front-facing stereo speakers, super loud, really super loud. The only phones that can maybe hold up with this is the Nexus 6 and maybe the Motorola X Pure. But other than that, I don't see any competition here. Super crazy loud. There is some bass, mids are great, highs are great. Absolutely great. The one thing that I have to mention, not complain though, is the maximum volume, because what I noticed on the highest maximum volume, it is super loud, but if you go one level lower, there is quite a noticeable drop in terms of volume. This is something I blame more Android for that, because I've noticed it on a few other devices, but since this one is so loud, one step lower sometimes is maybe not loud enough. So if you have something like a custom kernel, or if you have it rooted, you can set a few steps in between and actually fix that. So in terms of that, it is great. In terms of the headphone jack quality, not as great as the speaker, because the maximum volume is, I would say, good enough and the tonal balance is quite okay, but there are phones out on the market that just have a more powerful, better sounding headphone jack, but still good enough. Now, the highlight here maybe would be the performance, because if we check that, go into Chrome and see how great the scrolling performance is. It is so extremely nicely smooth. And everyone who ever used the Nexus device will know what I'm talking about when I say super smooth, because Nexus devices have this kind of amazing smoothness. But what I also noticed is that it gets some blur. And maybe this blur is the reason why it seems so smooth. Because if I would compare it with the Samsung Galaxy S7, which has a way more sharp scrolling and feels a little bit more hovering, maybe this is actually the reason why it is so powerful and so consistent. You have maybe seen a few lags throughout my scrolling here, but believe me, this device is very consistent, quite snappy, and does a really great job in terms of performance. So couldn't be any happier, because as you can see here, super nice. It just gets this a little bit disturbing or a little bit odd blur though, but super powerful, absolutely super powerful. And I don't even have to show the gaming performance, it is on a super high level. One thing to notice though is the temperatures, because it gets noticeably warm. With my hand being at around 33 degrees Celsius, I noticed this device in normal use is almost always at around 36, 37 degrees, more towards the top. So it's definitely noticeable warm. During gaming, it heats up a little bit more, gets something closer to maybe 30, 80 degrees, which is still okay, and I wouldn't really worry about it. Maybe it did throttle, but nothing that I noticed. So temperatures could be better, but it's nothing disturbing, nothing you should worry about, so all good here. About the battery life, a full charge takes 1 hour 55. I expected it actually to be a little bit faster, but still okay. And the battery life is something that I'm a little bit baffled about, because I've seen so many screen on time or pictures from other people and everyone is praising the battery life, and I'm for some reason not seeing that, because as you can see here, 17 hours of overall time with 5 hours of screen on time. But I have to say, this is with Wi-Fi only. Once I went with mobile data and the mixed use over the course of one day, 3.5, of course, this was the heaviest and worst result that I got, because usually I got, as you can see, slightly over 4 hours, actually closer to 4.5. 4 hours once again over the course of one day, also 4.5. So it's definitely more than decent, totally good enough toward good. But I expected more, because I've seen so many people with 5, 5.5 and even 6 hours. Of course, maybe they used a custom ROM, custom kernel with optimized settings, so that could be the reason. But what I noticed is on Wi-Fi I got easily, let's say, solid enough 5 hours, but once I was with mobile data, it went quite down. So there I would expect something between 4, 4.5, maybe closer to 4.5, which is still good. But for some reason I didn't manage to get the great battery life. I'm not quite sure why. Software, I won't even talk about that. Stock vanilla Android 6.0.1, Android N will be coming out on this device as soon as it's out. So no complaints here. For me personally, stock Android is a little bit too bare to minimum. Doesn't really offer me enough. I know it's minimalistic and a lot of people like this clean design, which is totally fine, but it is a Nexus device, so it offers the best possible custom ROM compatibility, and that's why I love it so much, because I would use a custom ROM on this, a custom kernel, and make the best out of it for my needs. But if you want something clean and minimalistic, it's definitely nothing wrong. It works out totally super solid. But what I would really like to see on stock Android even is a theme engine, because so many other phones have it right now, and every custom ROM has it. So that is something that I want to see on stock. Other than that, stock is absolutely fine, and I'm great with that. About the camera, I absolutely love it. I won't really show off anything because you have seen, I think, probably like over 100 camera reviews. My quick conclusion of that: selfies, super great, super sharp, all good done here. Low light capabilities are also quite good with HDR plus, also quite nice. Not quite S7 level, but once you go outside, I love one thing. It's so easy to snap great pictures. I almost never manage to get a back picture. Autofocus works super reliable, super fast. Pictures snap quite fast, are super sharp, detailed, great balanced, great exposed, and all that. And the video quality is amazing as well. The autofocus works very smooth. The exposure works very smooth. Colors are top notch. So in terms of camera qualities overall, I think it's at least somewhere at solid top 5, if not top 3, because the only ones I see maybe being better in terms of the back camera would maybe be the S7, maybe the V10 or the G4 from LG. But other than that, in terms of the front facer, it's way superior to the Galaxy S7. And yes, you didn't even see that, but that is here on the side. So let's get to the actual deal breakers, not to make this video too long, because why should it be? So design and build quality, definitely no deal breaker, actually a deal maker, because it's super sturdy, premium build with a really nice design. I can't say anything bad about it. It has been done great. The display, like I said, I think it's already very high quality display, but I think the calibration is just off. So I would definitely recommend you to use a custom kernel and fix it if you think it is too maybe warm. I know there's a sRGB color mode, but I think that one makes it look just a little bit too dull. In terms of sound, absolutely speakers are the main deal maker, because if you want a great media experience with display, once properly calibrated, you get such an amazing sound performance, and it's really hard to get anything even close to that. So kudos to that. In terms of performance, super high flagship level, but phones like the Huawei Mate 8 are already on the same level. The S7 in some aspects is better, but somewhere where this is definitely better is the browsing performance. Here it beats the S7 by miles. So the overall performance is absolutely flawless, and I would say like maybe 96% of what I would call flawless or perfect. 1% off because it's just not possible to be the best. 1% maybe off or 2 because I need a little bit room for something better, and maybe 1 or 2% off for the few little instances of rare lag that I've seen. But other than that, it is super solid and definitely top 3 performer out on the market without any doubt. In terms of battery life, it should be killer. For me, it's, let's say, slightly above average, definitely decent. Not quite sure why it's not that great for me. I've seen better phones, but it is still, for a flagship, from the ones that I reviewed, a little bit already higher on top. In terms of software, all good here. If you like a Nexus device, you will like the minimal look, and if you like the Nexus for the custom ROM compatibility, you will definitely love this one. In terms of camera, to finish that up, I'm super impressed, and I really love this camera, and I would personally actually prefer it or take it over the G4, because it was just so easy to get great pictures. Yes, the manual mode is maybe a little bit more limited, but I don't use that ever, and I really liked the accurate, nice pictures and video that it shot, so all good here. Now, the one thing that I wanted to tackle now is it the best Android phone you can get? And I would say it depends. If you want the best phablet, the only competitors are, I would say, the very close competitors, the Note 5, now the S7 Edge, and maybe the Huawei Mate 8. And with these 4 in comparison, it definitely holds up, and it still can, in many aspects, beat them, in some at least hold up to them. So I wouldn't say it's definitely the by far best phone out there anymore, but it is still, if you want, on the phablet market, for its value, for what it offers, one of the ones you should look out for, because overall it has really no flaw at all. I can't find anything. If I would have to call out the weakest part, it would maybe be the battery life, which is still more than fine enough, but all the rest is highest flagship level. And the few things that I actually complained about are really nitpicky stuff, just to have something to call out, to not it being perfect. So don't get me wrong with that. And if you maybe ask me S7 Edge, I can't say, since I haven't used it yet. I've just used the S7 Not quite so sure if you want a comparison between those two and just maybe me mixing it up, if it could be better if the bigger display. Can't say so far. I will definitely once, as I said, make a full comparison with the Huawei, because I definitely see the Huawei being a little bit superior in a few minor things, but it's definitely also inferior in a lot of things. So not to drag this any further. For the current price, yeah, I think it's the one to go for, because the Note 5 is still more expensive, the S7 Edge, and the people who are looking for a Nexus device want the clean minimalistic software, not touch with bloaty stuff. And then there isn't really any competition out there. The closest thing would maybe be the Moto X Pure, but in a direct comparison, this one would pretty much win in every little aspect. So absolutely top job. I'm personally maybe not super impressed. I'm not quite as hyper beasted as I thought this phone would be, because maybe it's just me, because I'm more focused towards smaller phones and I can't really find anything bad about it, and I see all the great things, but for some reason it didn't overly impress me. Not quite so sure why. Actually, I really don't know why, because like I said, for around $500 or euros, what it costs right now, this is the phone to get. No doubt about here. It is not the best Android phone, but for many people it actually will be. So I am taking this way too long. So I hope this was still kind of useful. I was a little bit odd because I actually planned to make this review a little bit different, but it is what it is. I hope you still liked it. Give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more content like this, subscribe to the channel and watch out for the comparison. Okay, until next time, bye.